Hi, welcome to Courageous Journeys. I'm Peggy Oliveira. One of the questions that I get asked quite often, well, really it's two different questions, but kind of the same answer. One is, what does it really mean to heal? And the second is, how do you know when you've healed? How do you know when you can stop the process? So the answer is kind of the same, because you know that you're there when you recognize that these things that healing are present for you. So what does it really mean to heal? So this is another one of those things that you could ask several different people and potentially get several different answers. My idea of what it means to heal is based on primarily my own experience. And then in doing this work over the years, what I've seen happen for other people. So, what does it mean to heal? If you think about the ways that you struggle now, whether it's symptoms related to depression or anxiety or something like that, relationship struggles, difficulty with your sense of self, worthiness, shame, all of those things, like almost any area of life, something that almost everybody struggles with. When you look at the ways that you struggle, what healing means is that you don't really struggle in those ways anymore. It doesn't mean that you never struggle again, or that you never struggle in those particular ways, but it means that it's not a daily experience. It means that when it comes up again in your life, you might experience a difficulty. You might experience some anxiety or feeling down or something like that, taking things personally, your sense of worthiness or unworthiness being triggered. Those things might happen. But the difference is that you recognize that they're happening. And because you've done the healing, you now have this foundation that is stable, that is based on a belief in your worthiness. So when those things end up coming up, you have the underlying belief that you are worthy. You've strengthened your coping muscles, healthy coping muscles, to know how to kind of almost automatically, not completely automatically, but much more easily, cope in a way that is healthy versus the ways that we tend to cope that are not healthy, like minimizing, avoiding, using substances or sex, becoming angry, shutting down, all of those things. So when you've done the work of healing, when something comes up in your life, instead of getting to that place where you are coping in unhealthy ways, isolating, feeling worthless, just believing the same things about yourself that you used to believe, instead of getting there and staying there and struggling for days or weeks or months, you recognize what's going on. And because you've built that foundation, you don't fall as far. So when you do fall, you don't fall as far, and you have the resources built inside of you at that point to help you get out of it much more easily. And in many aspects, much more automatically. You don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time figuring it out and thinking about what you need to do. Now, there are times that just as humans, life can be difficult. So there may be times in your life, once you're even kind of on the other side of healing, that something happens that might be really challenging or difficult. And you might find that it's much harder to get out of that. And those are the times that I always kind of am referring to, that it's natural and normal and healthy to go back and get support from a therapist or maybe even a coach. to go back and be reminded of the truth of who you are, having the place to be supported and held as you kind of find your way through. Because when there's a lot going on, you can feel kind of overwhelmed and have difficulty kind of seeing the light beyond the trees again. It can feel overwhelming. So having the support, even once you're on the other side, can often be a really important piece of that. So healing does not mean that you feel great all the time. Healing does not mean that you never struggle within yourself or even within a relationship. It doesn't mean that you don't ever have self-doubt. I think that's part of the human condition for everybody. It's just that difference, that you don't feel quite as consumed. You don't feel quite as overwhelmed by it. You begin to naturally do things differently. You naturally connect in with those coping mechanisms that are actually healthy. You learn that you can use avoidance as a healthy coping mechanism at times without being in denial. Or use avoidance without going to some other activity, like an addiction type of activity that is not good for you, or a self-sabotaging activity. So when I talk about healing, that's really what I'm talking about. It means that you speak up. It means that you feel that your voice matters, that if somebody's asking your opinion, you can give it without feeling like it's not okay, that somebody's going to judge you, because you recognize that even if somebody doesn't agree with what you're saying, that it doesn't mean that you're wrong or that you're bad. So in a relationship, you can ask for what you want. When somebody doesn't call you back, you don't take it personally. When somebody looks at you in a certain way, you don't automatically think that it means that they don't like you. You're comfortable in your body. It doesn't mean that you don't have challenges with your body, regardless of size, because anybody of any shape and size can struggle with their body. But you recognize that you are not your body, that your value is not about your body. So things will still happen. You will still have challenging times, but it won't have the depth of impact that it does now. I talk about healing, and even my program is called Journey to Freedom, and the retreat is Journey to Freedom, because healing is about letting go of the burdens of all of those things that I talked about. It's letting go of that so that you can live every day from a place of feeling the freedom of what it means to let all of that go, to be able to release all that you've been holding on to. And living your life from that place of freedom is what healing is. And you can be free and still have challenges. If somebody that you love dies, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to grieve. You're going to feel hurt. You're going to feel sad. You're going to feel guilty. You're going to move through those stages of grief. And support can be helpful. But you will be in a place where you recognize that it's not weak to feel, that it's okay to talk about it. You'll recognize even within yourself what would feel good to you. And then you can seek that or ask for that. Create circumstances that allow you to receive that. Instead of telling yourself that you shouldn't be upset, that you should just get over it, that it's not okay to feel all those things. And those are pretty big differences. And I can tell you from personal experience how significantly that changes how you feel on every day that you wake up. How it feels so differently within your body. It's literally an experience of as if you've been carrying around all this weight, that backpack that I talk about, full of rocks. It's literally as if you've been able to release that. And then when a challenging thing happens, you feel as if you're maybe picking up another one of those rocks. But instead of piling it all in again inside of that backpack, you recognize that you're carrying it. And then you do something very intentional to let it go, to help you release it. When I say let it go, I don't mean just put it out of your mind and pretend it didn't happen. I'm saying let it go from a place of energetically releasing it because you've been able to move through it. And those are very different things. So when a challenge happens, instead of feeling overwhelmed or panicked or shut down, you're able to say, wow, this is really challenging, or this is really hurtful, or wow, I've been feeling really down or not motivated. I wonder what's going on here. And instead of judging yourself because you're struggling, you come at it from a place of curiosity. And from that place, you're not judging. You're just witnessing and saying, hey, what's going on here? Maybe this is something to talk about. Maybe this is a time to get support. When somebody that you care about dies, that's a time that you might find yourself feeling a little more challenged. Obviously, if a relationship ends, you might feel a little bit more challenged. And that's natural. If you are a survivor of abuse, childhood abuse, particularly sexual abuse, if you have a child, that's often a time that you find yourself struggling, or the child becomes the age that you were when either your abuse started or something significant about your abuse happened. Sometimes particular anniversaries, you can find that maybe you're feeling a little bit more struggle than normal. There are a lot of things that will bring up those challenges. But that doesn't mean that you haven't done the healing. It doesn't mean that you have to start over. As long as you're able to acknowledge from a place of acceptance that you're struggling, and then be very intentional about getting the support or doing the things, taking care of yourself so that you can move through it. Because what happens when you haven't done the healing? When you're struggling, you beat yourself up, you shut down, you isolate, you start feeling consumed and overwhelmed by all of the self-doubt, and those core beliefs kick in telling you that you're not enough and whatever else they may be telling you. You react in ways that are not healthy for you or for other people. That's what happens when you haven't yet gotten to the other side of healing. So it looks very different. It feels very different. So to the part about how do you know when you've healed? This isn't something that all of a sudden one day something happens and like, okay, now I'm healed. It's that you recognize that how you feel has been different. You recognize that when a challenge pops up, that you reacted differently to it. And that there's been a period of time that that's been the case. Or you recognize that there have been different challenges that have popped up. And that you've got this new pattern now of being able to experience it differently, to be able to take care of yourself through it and move through it. So you recognize, and it typically takes reflecting, which is one of the reasons why it's important to have support of a professional through this process because they can help you see. Because when you're doing it, it happens at such a gradual pace. And because it becomes somewhat automatic, you don't even recognize that it's necessarily happening. So when you reflect on it, or when somebody can mirror that back to you, you see that, oh, this has changed. And I've used this example in other videos that I've done, but this is very relevant to this video. For me, one of the things that kind of happened early on that I recognized was a shift. And it was a moment. It was like an aha moment in a way, was that I didn't even really realize that I was healing because, again, I didn't know that that was possible. And I still had quite a bit to do. But one day I heard the rain, and it was pouring down rain, and I do not like rain. And rain, whenever it would rain, I would feel really pretty depressed. But one day it was raining, and I opened up the blinds, which normally I wouldn't even open the blinds because I don't want to see it raining. But I opened up the blinds, and the thought that crossed my mind was, I'm so glad it didn't rain yesterday. And it was literally like a moment of, like, who said that? I remember actually like having a thought in my head, and this was years and years ago, but I remember having a thought like, where did that come from? Like, I actually said that to myself because that is not who I had been. That is not how I typically responded to rain. But in that moment, it was an automatic thing. I didn't have to make myself think it. But in that moment, I thought, I'm so glad it didn't rain yesterday because I had stuff. My children had soccer games or something going on. And that was the thought. I'm just so glad it didn't rain yesterday. And when I recognized that that's what I felt a sense of gratitude. I wasn't feeling depressed because it was raining today. I felt gratitude that it didn't rain yesterday. And in that moment, I recognized a shift that happened. And that was really powerful as I continued to move forward in my healing, because I recognized that there was a shift. I recognized that something changed, and I didn't even realize that anything had changed. I didn't even intentionally have to make myself think that. But something shifted. And it doesn't mean from that moment on, I was perfectly okay with rain, because I wasn't. I still don't like the rain, which is part of the reason I moved to Arizona. But you recognize when you reflect typically that there's a shift in how you feel, in how you think, in how you react to things in your life. So that's how you know that you've done a lot of healing. Now, in terms of being able to say, okay, I'm healed, I don't think that actually ever really happens, because we're human. And anybody, no matter what your life experience, there will be challenges. So for me, what does real healing mean? It's about those things that I mentioned. Again, it doesn't mean that you never struggle. So being on the other side of healing, and kind of when you can stop the really consistent work, and actually this might be two different things, because I think you can get to a point where you don't necessarily need the consistent work. And I would say that maybe that, and it's going to be different for everybody, because it depends on how much support you have outside of the work that you're doing. It depends on how much stress you have in your life, whether you still have a relationship with your abuser. So there's a lot of different factors that play into it. But overall, I would say that maybe you can cut back on the support, or that you're in a place where really just continuing to practice is good. When you feel like you have a really full understanding of what kinds of things trigger you, how you tend to react with different kinds of triggers, not feeling any shame, that's a big one. And that takes quite a bit of time typically to work on. When you are using really healthy coping ways of coping. So you're reaching out for support. You're not isolating. You're not using any kind of behaviors or engaging in behaviors that are self-sabotaging. So when you realize that those things are no longer happening, that can sometimes be a point when you would talk to your therapist about either ending your work or decreasing the frequency of your work. So how do you know, kind of like, okay, I'm on the other side of healing? I think some of those things are still there. I think a lot of that is present at that point too. And I think it's more just about how much time has gone on, how much time has passed. And I can't give you a definitive when it's 6 months, when it's a year, when it's 5 years. But I would say, again, I'm having a hard time with this because it's too difficult to pinpoint. But I guess if I had to give it a time frame, I would say if maybe a year or maybe 2 have gone by and you're consistently using healthy ways of coping, when a challenge comes up, you're able to not take it personally. You're able to recognize what's going on and move through it. And if a challenge does come up that you're having difficulty with and you're willing to go back and get support and not feel weak about that, not beating yourself up because you're struggling, if you've been able to do that for a year or more, I would say that you can say that you're on the other side of healing. But that's a year or so after you've begun really consistently incorporating all of that. And in that year, you continue to do that somewhat automatically. So I hope that feels somewhat helpful. It gives you something a little bit more kind of tangible, even though much of this healing process is not. It's more about feeling. But I know that it can feel like a struggle when you don't know what it looks like. When you feel like, am I going to have to be in therapy forever? And no, you absolutely do not. But it is important to recognize that needing a therapist or choosing to see a therapist is a healthy thing. That's a healthy thing because none of us can navigate the life challenges that come up completely on our own. And while we may have great friends or partners, there's a reason that your therapist cannot be your friend. Because we need a place where we can just be without having to give. We need somebody that can help us objectively sort through those things. And I have shared this before as well. I feel like I've been on the other side of healing for I don't know, maybe at least 10 years, maybe even 15 years or so. But a handful of years or so ago, I was really struggling with a situation and I went back to therapy because I recognized it actually took me a little while to think, okay, I think I really need to go see somebody. But I recognized that, okay, the way that I'm reacting to the situation, there's something else going on here. I didn't know what it was, but I recognized that this doesn't feel good. And the way that I'm reacting in this particular circumstance is way more, like I'm feeling a lot more about this than the situation really warrants. So I went back to therapy, and I don't remember exactly, maybe 6 months or so, because part of that was uncovering what was really going on there. And I'm a therapist. I've been a therapist at that point. I guess I would have been a therapist for like 15 years. So, wow. But I had been a therapist for a long time, but I wasn't able, because I was feeling it, because I was reacting to it, I wasn't able to really uncover what was really going on there. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that every therapist needs to go to therapy. Certainly should have gone to therapy before they became a therapist, but also needs therapy at different times, or at least consultation as they continue to be a therapist. Because we all have challenges. We all have challenges, and there's no shame in that. It's part of the human experience. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to share them in the comments below. If you have a question specifically that you would like me to answer in a Q&A series, you can send them to q&a@courageousjourneys.com. I will share that link in the description as well. I will look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great rest of your day.